Today, I want to take you deep into the world of the INFJ mind, into 12 very specific and often misunderstood areas of life where INFJs stand apart, not because they're rebellious for the sake of rebellion, but because they instinctively know their energy, their compassion, and their vision are far too valuable to be wasted on trivial illusions. And as we move through each of these 12 things, you may find yourself nodding, perhaps even laughing a little, or feeling that strange sense of relief that only comes when someone finally says out loud the thing you've been secretly carrying in silence all this time. So, let's step into the truth together. 12 normal things that an INFJ simply does not care about, even when the world screams that they should. 1. The rush for status and recognition. For most people, status is a currency that fuels their self-worth, a ladder they feel compelled to climb even if the climb itself leaves them breathless and disconnected. Yet for an INFJ, this scramble for recognition feels not only hollow but almost irrelevant because the value they see in themselves comes not from applause or external trophies but from the silent, unshakable alignment between their actions and their integrity, which means that while others anxiously polish their resumes and hunger for validation from titles or positions, the INFJ quietly steps out of that game, choosing instead to focus on inner fulfillment, authentic connections, and meaningful contributions that cannot be neatly captured on a plaque. INFJs, being rare visionaries, understand on a deep intuitive level that status is fleeting, that recognition is conditional, and that the very people who praise you today may be the same who forget or betray you tomorrow, which is why they do not cling to external acknowledgement as the measure of their worth, but instead find comfort in the invisible victories. The times they stayed true to their principles when no one was watching, the moments they gave without expecting applause, and the sacrifices they made silently that shaped their soul far more than any certificate ever could. And while this refusal to chase recognition often confuses those who cannot comprehend how someone can thrive without external validation, it gives the INFJ a rare kind of freedom, a power to remain untethered to society's games, and in that detachment, they find both strength and peace. 2. The frenzy over fashion trends. For many people, fashion trends are like a language that communicates belonging, prestige, and style, but for INFJs, the endless cycle of what's in this season and what's out next season often feels shallow and exhausting, because they are not concerned with projecting an image for the sake of external approval but rather with wearing what feels authentic, comfortable, and expressive of their inner truth. The INFJ may admire beauty in all its forms, and they may occasionally enjoy putting thought into their wardrobe, but they will never submit to the conveyor belt of consumerism that demands constant reinvention just to keep up appearances, because for them, clothing is not about performance but about congruence, about aligning the outer with the inner, about ensuring that what they wear does not distract from who they are. This is why an INFJ can wear the same outfit repeatedly without shame, why they may blend timeless pieces with personal flair instead of conforming to every new style, and why they often reject the pressure to use fashion as a mask, because their soul longs for authenticity over artifice, substance over surface, and connection over costume. And though society often tries to convince them that they must dress to impress or risk invisibility, INFJs quietly resist, knowing that true presence is felt not in what you wear but in the energy you bring, the depth you offer, and the truth you embody. 3. The idea of fitting in at any cost. Perhaps one of the clearest lines that separates INFJs from the mainstream is their deep resistance to the concept of fitting in simply for the sake of belonging. Because while others may bend themselves into shapes that gain them acceptance, INFJs understand intuitively that to sacrifice authenticity for approval is to abandon the very core of who they are, and nothing feels more suffocating to them than betraying their inner truth just to be liked. From a young age, many INFJs learn the painful lesson that blending in feels safe but costs them their soul, and though they may experiment with masking, with softening their depth, with imitating the rhythms of those around them, the emptiness of that conformity eventually pushes them back toward themselves, forcing them to embrace their uniqueness even if it means walking alone. The INFJ's refusal to contort themselves into a socially palatable version of who they are often alienates them from groups, but it also gives them a rare strength, because while others spend their lives in quiet desperation chasing acceptance, INFJs find peace in solitude, content in the knowledge that their worth is not dependent on fitting a mold but on being whole, being real, and being free. And though outsiders may view them as aloof, distant, or even rebellious, the truth is that INFJs care deeply, but they will never sell out their authenticity to buy counterfeit belonging, because for them, to betray themselves is the most dangerous kind of loneliness of all. 4. The need for constant entertainment. In a world that is increasingly addicted to stimulation, where silence is feared and people seek endless distractions to avoid confronting their inner world, INFJs stand apart as beings who simply do not care about chasing constant entertainment, because their minds and souls are already overflowing with inner landscapes, deep reflections, and boundless imagination that makes boredom almost impossible. Where others crave background noise, endless scrolling, or superficial amusements, INFJs crave depth, and they are unafraid to sit in stillness, to read, to dream, to meditate, to explore the quiet corners of existence where most people fear to tread, because they know that entertainment without meaning is nothing more than an anesthetic, a numbing of the self rather than a nourishing of the soul. This doesn't mean INFJs don't enjoy movies, music, or laughter. In fact, they often cherish them even more because they savor them with intentionality, choosing stories and songs that stir their hearts, challenge their minds, and remind them of the beauty in humanity. But they refuse to be enslaved by the endless demand for stimulation that leaves people restless and disconnected from themselves. In their resistance to constant entertainment, INFJs preserve the sacred space within them where silence, intuition, and creativity thrive, a space that the modern world is desperate to drown out but that they fiercely protect, because they know that without it, they would lose the very essence of who they are. 5. The obsession with networking for advantage. For many people, networking is a calculated strategy, a way to accumulate contacts, leverage relationships, and climb ladders, but for INFJs, the transactional nature of this pursuit feels not only draining but deeply inauthentic, because they do not care about collecting acquaintances like business cards. They care about building bonds that are real, soulful, and enduring. INFJs instinctively sense when someone is trying to use them, and nothing makes them retreat faster than realizing they are being seen as a means to an end rather than as a whole human being, which is why they often resist the pressure to attend events, join cliques, or play social games designed for advancement, because they know that such hollow connections ultimately lead to emptiness. Instead, they invest their energy into relationships that are built on trust, shared values, and mutual understanding, relationships that may be fewer in number but infinitely richer in quality, because for them, it is not about how many people know your name but how deeply even a few souls truly know your heart. This refusal to play the networking game may cost them opportunities in the eyes of the world, but in the eyes of their own conscience, it preserves their integrity, and that is a currency they value infinitely more than influence. 6. The pursuit of a perfect image. In a culture obsessed with perfection, where people curate flawless feeds, edit out their scars, and strive to present themselves as polished beings without cracks, INFJs quietly rebel against the pursuit of a perfect image, because they know on a soul-deep level that perfection is an illusion, and that true beauty is found in authenticity, vulnerability, and imperfection. They do not care about looking perfect because they understand that life is messy, that growth is born from struggle, and that humanity shines brightest not when it hides its wounds but when it wears them as proof of survival, resilience, and courage. While others may sacrifice authenticity for aesthetic, INFJs embrace their contradictions, their rough edges, and their complexities, because they know that to be real is infinitely more powerful than to be flawless, and to live truthfully is more compelling than to appear untouchable. In fact, it is often the cracks in their armor, the tears in their eyes, and the vulnerability in their voice that make INFJs magnetic, because others sense the courage it takes to live without artifice, and in their rawness, INFJs give permission to others to embrace their own humanity without shame. 7. INFJs don't care about being the center of attention. In a world addicted to spotlight moments, the likes, the applause, the validation of being seen. INFJs quietly slip into the shadows, because they've never been interested in standing on a pedestal for the sake of ego. While others crave recognition, INFJs crave impact. They don't want people looking at them, they want people feeling something because of them. They don't need the spotlight, they need their message, their values, and their authenticity to ripple out in ways that cannot be measured by applause or popularity. This is why so many INFJs excel in behind-the-scenes roles, in guiding others, in creating movements where their name might never be known, but their fingerprints are everywhere. When people chase fame, the INFJ sees emptiness. When people scramble for validation, the INFJ quietly thinks, why? What's the point if the applause fades tomorrow? They do not care about standing in the center of the stage, they care about whispering truth into the soul of the one person in the back of the room who needed it most. That's where their heart lives. 8. Competing for attention. In a world where everyone seems to crave being seen, admired, and constantly validated, the INFJ quietly slips out of this competition, because the act of chasing attention feels not only exhausting but deeply empty to them. They see through the ways people posture, exaggerate, and craft their lives like performances for an unseen audience, and it strikes the INFJ as a tragic misuse of life's brevity. INFJs don't care about standing at the center of attention, because they know that being seen doesn't mean being understood, and for them, true understanding has always been the real prize. They are the ones who might walk into a crowded gathering and sit quietly at the edge, watching the dynamics unfold rather than inserting themselves into the spotlight, because for them attention without depth is noise without meaning. And while others may judge this as withdrawal or aloofness, the INFJ understands that their energy is sacred, and wasting it on superficial recognition leaves them drained and further away from what they truly value: intimacy, authenticity, and soul-to-soul resonance. They would rather be misunderstood and invisible to the masses than compromise their inner truth for applause that fades the moment the spotlight turns away. 9. Wealth without purpose. For many, money is the ultimate measure of success, a symbol of safety, status, and power. But INFJs have always seen it differently, not because they don't understand its usefulness, but because they know how hollow wealth feels when it is stripped of meaning. While others may dream of luxury for its own sake, the INFJ quietly asks, what is this wealth for? Does it heal, build, empower, or nurture? Or does it simply inflate egos and create distance between people? They don't care about amassing wealth for show, because at the core, their compass points toward purpose, and purpose cannot be bought or manufactured with zeros in a bank account. INFJs may even appear unconventional in how they treat money. They might decline high-paying opportunities if those opportunities threaten their values, and they might live simply, rejecting excess, because simplicity frees them from the weight of material entrapment. They don't care about wealth as a badge of importance. They care about using it as a tool to serve, to create, and to align with their mission in life. And while some may scoff at their apparent detachment, the INFJ's indifference to wealth without purpose is one of the purest demonstrations of their refusal to sell out their soul for temporary comfort. 10. Gossip and social games. There's a reason INFJs feel drained in environments where gossip dominates the air, because for them, gossip is one of the most trivial and destructive currencies humanity has ever normalized. Most people seem to derive excitement from dissecting the lives of others, spreading half-truths, and trading in speculation, but INFJs cannot summon the same interest, because their intuition and empathy make them acutely aware of the unseen damage words can inflict. They don't care about being in the loop, if the loop is nothing more than character assassination disguised as conversation. In fact, gossip often feels like a betrayal of the very thing INFJs hold sacred: trust. They would rather be excluded from every clique, denied every invitation, and mislabeled as distant, than compromise their integrity by feeding into shallow games that leave everyone emptier in the end. Their refusal to play these games doesn't just separate them, it unsettles others, because in their quiet indifference to gossip, the INFJ holds up a mirror to the smallness of those who thrive on it. And in a world obsessed with tearing each other down, their lack of care for gossip becomes an act of quiet rebellion, a statement that dignity, truth, and empathy matter infinitely more than fleeting social thrills. 11. Constant busyness as a badge of honor. In modern society, busyness is worshipped as if constantly being in motion is proof of worth, but INFJs see through this illusion, and they quietly step away from the chaos with an almost unsettling calm. They don't care about proving themselves through endless tasks or boasting about how little sleep they got, because they know that being busy is not the same as being fulfilled. They see how people wear exhaustion like a medal, confusing burnout for significance, and it saddens them to watch lives wasted in frantic motion that never touches anything meaningful. For the INFJ, stillness is sacred, reflection is powerful, and rest is not laziness but wisdom. They care less about appearing productive in the eyes of others and more about aligning their actions with their soul's calling. While others rush forward in a haze of activity, INFJs often pause, recalibrate, and choose the slower path, because they know life isn't a sprint to be won, it's a journey to be lived deeply. Their indifference to busyness unsettles those who secretly fear silence, because when the INFJ chooses stillness, it exposes how much of modern busyness is really just a distraction from facing ourselves. 12. Being liked by everyone. Perhaps the most defining thing INFJs don't care about, something that sets them apart in ways few can truly understand, is the idea of being universally liked. While many bend, twist, and fragment themselves just to maintain approval, the INFJ eventually learns the radical truth that being liked is not only impossible but meaningless if it comes at the expense of authenticity. Early in life, INFJs may exhaust themselves trying to please everyone, to soften their words, to adjust their presence, and to smooth the rough edges of their truth just to avoid conflict or rejection. But with time, with heartbreak, and with the hard lessons of betrayal, they awaken to the realization that universal approval is a prison, and liberation begins the moment they stop caring about being liked by all. Instead, they care about being respected by a few, understood by the rare, and true to themselves above all else. Their indifference to being universally liked is terrifying to those who rely on conformity to maintain control, because a person who no longer fears rejection is a person who cannot be manipulated. And so the INFJ walks with quiet defiance, carrying the peace of knowing that being disliked by many may be the greatest proof that they are living authentically. So when you look at the INFJ and notice all the normal things they don't seem to care about, status, small talk, trends, attention, gossip, busyness, or universal approval, you might be tempted to call them cold, strange, or detached, but the truth is far deeper. Their indifference is not apathy, it's alignment. It's a conscious refusal to waste their precious energy on illusions that the world worships but that their soul recognizes as hollow. And in this quiet refusal, they reveal a deeper kind of power, the power of living from within rather than being dictated from without, the power of being unshaken in a world that constantly demands compromise. INFJs do not care about what the world says they should care about, because their vision is fixed on what truly matters: truth, meaning, authenticity, and connection. They may look like outliers, but they are in fact living reminders that freedom begins not when we gain more, but when we need less. And maybe that is why being an INFJ often feels lonely, because they are walking away from what everyone else is chasing, into a place where fewer will follow, but where the air is cleaner, the heart is lighter, and the soul finally feels at home.